Hello and welcome to this week's lecture. This week we're going to talk generally about collection development and weeding, about book selection and where different resources that can help you with book selection, and awards. So collection development is really broadly how you add material to your collection and making it a useful and balanced collection that works for the students in your library. It means choosing new materials, identifying gaps, identifying needs, and it also means weeding. Weeding is really part of collection development because it helps keep your collection current and in good shape and interesting. There's some interesting studies about weeding actually helping with circulation numbers, which is counterintuitive, but people don't like to see a bunch of crappy old books on the shelf. They prefer something that's new and clean. Even students will be attracted to interesting covers that don't look overly worn and look attractive and appealing. So that's part of what you need to do when you're weeding. Even if you don't have a lot of money to replace books, sometimes you want to get rid of what's there so that the jewels stand out among the collection. So what we're going to talk about I'm going to give you a bunch of resources for choosing new materials, places you can go to choose materials, not only for the books that you have to choose to read during this course, but when you're adding new books to your collection. Identifying gaps comes in a couple of different ways. You can do it through looking at your collection as a whole. There's some reports that you can get out of your collection, whatever your circulation, Destiny is one that's often used, whatever your circulation application is, your software is, there's usually ways to look at what's there, particularly easier in the Dewey sections, but also possible in terms of, looking at how old your collection. It might be a gap in terms of new material, might be a gap in terms of certain authors or certain types of material. Graphic novels, which we're going to talk about later in the year, are certainly very popular and very interesting. So if you have a gap there, that's something that you need to fill. Gaps could be identified by the students, by teachers, by parents even, identifying that there's books that they would like to be reading or need to be using for curriculum. Curriculum is more a need, and you can identify those needs also, particularly in nonfiction. We're going to spend a lot of time this semester talking about fiction, although we will cover nonfiction. I tend to talk about nonfiction books more in the information sources and services class, if you've had that with me, because a lot of those have to do with satisfying curriculum and providing material for research and for reading. So you can identify needs also in terms of having a place on your desk where people can write down suggestions, that something that they're looking for. I put a reading on this week's reading list that's very short, that talks about how somebody did this, basically identified needs and gaps through using our second graders to help with collection development. And it was a very interesting way to do that. And I don't remember if it was there or in something else. They talked about have an Amazon wish list going, that parents, if they have money or they want to donate books, they can do it that way. I know that money is a problem, but this goes along with advocacy and advocating for your library to have more money, to have a collection so that your students can read, because reading especially reading for pleasure, is so important. Some of the things to take into account when you're reading is currency, how new it is. Not to say you need to get rid of everything old, but certainly currency has its place as an indicator, especially with nonfiction, because something about computers that's 15 years old probably won't be very useful except for as a historical perspective on what computers looked like 15 years ago, but certainly not helpful to your students now. Something about the solar system, unless it's changed or needs to be updated, might be fine at 10 years old, but there might be something newer out there that also appeals in a different way. Condition of the book, as I said earlier, if a book is really falling apart, we have those favorite books at home that we'll read over and over again that are falling apart, but it's probably not the best to have one of them in the library if you can't continue to fix it. If you can replace it even with a paperback edition that's not that expensive, it's a good idea to do so. If nothing else, if the pages are falling out, it may frustrate the child who gets it that's missing a page at a crucial moment in a novel where the action is coming to a head and that page is missing. But even just having torn covers or dirty books, it just does not appeal to a lot of readers, and like I said, it can hide the gems in your collection. And use. When was the last time it was used? And again, currency and use, you can run a report usually if your collection is cataloged on some kind of software, which, sad to say, there are some collections out there that still are not cataloged, but you can run it for currency. And last time used, we used to call ours the Dusty Book Report, and you could pick a certain number of years and do see if the book had been circulated in that number of years. Now maybe it was hiding, and if you put it out on a display, it'll pique somebody's interest. If you put it out on a display and it hasn't been checked out for years and it still doesn't get checked out, maybe it's time to let it go. That being said, there's things that come in and out of fashion, and you're going to need them at some point in the future. So what I'm saying is, it's part looking at these elements, but it's also part an art, and knowing your students and what they need and what they'll read and what the curriculum is like. So when you are ready to add to your collection, here are some sources, review sources, that are good to keep in mind. Hornbook is a smaller review source that tends to only review it doesn't review everything. School Library Journal reviews just about everything that's published by the major publishers, and some smaller ones also, so you get a really comprehensive look at everything that's published. It's a lot to go through, and there's a lot of material there. If you read it, you'll also get a really good idea of what is being published, what the zeitgeist is for the time. Hornbook chooses a smaller segment of those books and only looks at books that they would recommend. School Library Journal will include books that they might not say is for everybody. They're usually not out and out negative, but they might point out some issues that would cause you maybe not to include the book in your school. Hornbook probably wouldn't put that review in their book because they don't have, in their magazine, because they don't have as many pages and don't review as many books. Hornbook and School Library Journal also include other interesting articles. Hornbook a little more in depth, School Library Journal more not as in depth, and less literary and more about librarianship, which is good also. Booklist is another publication. I don't use Booklist as much and haven't used it as much, but it's another publication that you can look into. Kirkus has a reputation of being sometimes different from the rest of the publications. You often find that something that's starred in SLJ, starred books are above and beyond recommended, highly recommended. So you might find something that's starred in either School Library Journal or Hornbook and isn't starred in Kirkus. Kirkus hates it, SLJ loves it. SLJ hates it, Kirkus loves it. So I don't know if that still happens quite as much, but it's interesting. If you get a book that's starred in all three of them, then you know it has broad appeal, and it's a good book to be looking at. Kirkus, I believe, is available. You can read some reviews online. You don't have to subscribe. Hornbook and School Library Journal, you'd have to subscribe. Hornbook also does a wrap-up of reviews. It's the Hornbook Guidebook, and you can get like a 14-day subscription for a smaller amount if you want to once a year take a peek at it and see, kind of, spend a week or 2 weeks with reading through Hornbook, and they've rated their books, I think, 1 to 5, and so you can kind of sort and get an idea of what's been published over the last. It's done in September, and no, it's done in June and December, and it looks at the 6 months previous. So it comes out covering June, like it'll come out in the spring, covering up to December. So that can be an inexpensive way to kind of, if you have some dedicated time, you can just get the subscription for a short period of time. Or maybe you can share subscriptions among libraries or with your public library. There's other different ways you can do that. Voya is Voice of Youth Advocates, and it reviews older books for older students, tweens and teens. It tends to review. Bulletin of the Center for Children's Books, BCCB, also has reviews and lists. So this is a good resource that's free. So you see January stars, it gives you starred titles. Blue ribbons for 2018 give you a little bit of a description of the book, so it's another good resource. There's some great book blogs or websites that can be useful in keeping up with children's literature and YA literature. I like this one a lot, Disability in Kidlit. It has reviews. It's not updated. It doesn't have a ton of reviews. Just looking at these, hasn't been updated in a while, but the reviews that they have are really wonderful because they're written about books that have characters with disability in them. Whatever that disability is, they'll get somebody who has that disability to review that book. So it's a review by somebody who is of the community and can give us a real take on the book. Is it representing that experience authentically and it properly, accurately? That's the word I'm looking for. Cynthia Lettich Smith has some children's and young adult bibliographies, and I like because she's got some multicultural ones on interracial families, relationship, and identity. And then genres, limited genres, but you can see there's some nice topics, not huge lists, but good information. This is a great blog this is by Debbie Reese, American Indians and Children Literature, and she has been writing for quite a few years on how Native Americans are represented in children's literature. I've learned a ton from her about representation and presentation of minorities and marginalized peoples in books, because even though she focuses on Native perspectives, you can take what she's saying and how she is examining books and apply that to other populations and look at the books to see how they would be, just take that learning and take it to apply it to other books. It can be tough to read at the beginning because there's books that we have loved for years that she will take on. And it's tough to do that, but it's important. We'll talk more about this when we talk about multicultural books, but this is a great site for learning an awful lot. I really like this one, Rukhsana Khan, because she does a Muslim book list, and it's great. So she does have some books, and she features her own books, but she also features other books. What I want to say about Debbie Reese's site and this site, always Debbie Reese's site. If I'm not sure about a Native American book that's there, I'll always search her site to see what she has to say about it, and then make my own decision about whether or not to include it. Same with this. If she has it on here, I feel a little more sure about using it because I've had somebody from outside my perspective look at it. She's from a Muslim culture, and so she looks at the book and can give me a perspective that I wouldn't get myself. And of course, We Need Diverse Books, great website. We Need Diverse Books came about maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I've lost track of the date. There's a Book Expo America takes place either in New York or Chicago, I think, sometimes in DC. And basically it's open to teachers, librarians, and people working in the book world, like booksellers and publishers. Publishers present mostly. So it's kind of like a Comic-Con for books, but you have to be a teacher or a librarian to get in, to buy a ticket. And you can get tons of advanced reading copies and see all kinds of publishers. It's great. It's a lot of fun. Because it was limited to teachers, librarians, educators, etc., they decided to add on basically BookCon, which really was Comic-Con with books. And they were putting together panels, and their one panel representing children's books was 3 white males. And this really annoyed a lot of people in the publishing industry, particularly people of color and people from diverse backgrounds who were not being represented, and women who were not being represented. So they developed, and you can read the story here, but they developed this. It started as a hashtag, We Need Diverse Books, just kind of saying, let's go beyond just white male authors and look farther out when you're looking at books and looking at who to have to represent children's literature. And it became a website, and it went from the hashtag to the website to now they do some wonderful things where they mentor writers of color and have awards and have all kinds of, you can see the book lists, and there's a resources page here. So where to find diverse books, although some of their links are not up to date, but it's a good place to start. And I would suggest, if you're looking for diverse books, and I'll come back to this probably when I talk about multicultural books again, but it's a great resource. Probably gonna have less to talk about when I get to that week than I should, or you might hear it again. There's some blogs too. Educating Alice is by, I think, Monica Edinger, who is a teacher who's very knowledgeable about books. She works at a school in New York and also happens to be very much an Alice in Wonderland fan. So she wrote this before the Newbery, and she'll probably be commenting on the Newbery winners soon. Fuse 8 production is school library, Elizabeth Bird, who's also, I think, a New York City librarian, and she does reviews of books also on her site. 7 Impossible Things Before Breakfast. If nothing else, it is a great title, but also does book reviews and has been doing them for a while, as you can see. And some of these also have additional book sites, so you can look through these and find some Nerdy Book Club. Actually, I'm following Nerdy Book Club too. They have um, uh, some good blogs that I'm enjoying. Guys Read is a good one. The Brown Bookshelf is good. So there's a bunch of different ones you can look on these. Dispatches from Wonderland also has a bunch. They were another site. These are more YA books, but you can see just yesterday she posted the Dactyl Hill Squad, which is getting huge great critical reviews. It's about it's kind of a fantasy, but about African Americans during the Civil War who have dinosaurs. So it's great, and it's by Daniel Jose Older, who also will be talking about him during the fantasy and science fiction week. But I think also she had a bunch of, or this sometimes it's multiple people. Did I see? No, it was the other link. But here's some other bookish links. The Lee and Low blog, I didn't put that down here, but that's also very good. Publishers Lee and Low work on diversity, and I think I'll cover that in the diversity lecture, in the multicultural lecture. These can be great. You can also, it's a time sink, but choose ones that seem to speak to you and that you like the way they review the books, and maybe keep up with one of them, have a couple of them sent to your email. I don't keep up with all of these, but it's nice to know about them. If I'm looking particularly for a review on a particular book where I want some different perspectives, I'll look in their websites, and see what they have to say. So it's good to have a couple of these in your pocket. So now we're going to talk about awards. Awards are great for recognizing excellence. I always think about awards a little bit like the Olympics, where even the person that finishes 10th is so much better than anything I could do, and just probably fractions of difference in how well they can do things. So awards are great, but it's also not the only place you should draw recommendations from. I wouldn't just purchase award-winning books because they've won awards. Although now it's nice, there's quite a few awards, and I'll be showing you some of them, so you do have a bigger pool to choose from than just Newbery and Caldecott, which is probably the two that you recognize. And it's nice to look at the honor books because you've got the next 2 or 3 or 4, depending, that were almost the winners. One thing to look at is the criteria, because each of the awards have different criteria. So it's good to know. I'm going to mention a few of them as we go through, but it's good to know what they're looking at when they're looking at awarding these books a prize. There can be problems. Just because a book has won an award doesn't automatically mean that there's no problems with the book. It's particularly problems to do with diversity issues, or if you look at old Caldecott and Newbery winning books, some of them are clearly racist. So just because it won an award in 1956, it doesn't mean that it's something you should recommend to your students. And I'm not picking on whatever won in 1956. I don't know off the top of my head. But you need to be aware that sometimes not everybody agrees that a book should have won the award, or that later on, as we learn more about representation and as we become more aware, that the book is still good. So just award does not automatically mean this is a great book for everybody for all reasons. So some examples: Newbery, of course, is started in 1922. Up to age 14, and it awards the writer of the book. And actually, I've given you a link to the YMA Youth Media Awards just yesterday, the 28th. I'm recording this on the 29th, just the 28th. They announced all of the awards at Midwinter. I was supposed to be there. Um, Fortunately, I broke my bone last week and did it on Wednesday. Was supposed to travel on Thursday. Decided with a broken collarbone, it probably wasn't a good idea to try and travel to Seattle. But I've given you a link so you can see all of the new books, and you can see actually the 2019. They updated the websites already for ALA, and these are the newest books that were just announced yesterday. So Mercy Suarez Changes Gears by Meg Benina, The Night, and two honor books, The Night Diary and Book of Boy. And you can see here they list the people who are on the committee. What's interesting about the ALA committees is people who were on the committees are never allowed to speak about the deliberations that go on behind closed doors, even years after they happened. So you never know what kinds of discussions were held behind those closed doors that wound up with a particular book. And this comes up particularly when people are saying, huh? And why did that win? Not that I'm saying that about any of these, but there are certain books that get that reaction from people. I think this year it's going to be perhaps the Caldecott. Some people might have something to say about it. So the Caldecott is another. These are the two big awards, the Newbery and the Caldecott. They've been around forever. The Caldecott 1938 began, and this honors the illustrator. It's interesting because the words, and matter of fact, there's been some books that have no words, but it's all about the illustrations. The most distinguished American picture book for children, and that is what they're awarding. So the writer gets a boost because whenever you put a Newbery or Caldecott medal on a book, it sells, and it continues to sell. But it's really honoring the illustrator, and that's who accepts the award at the end. At the Caldecott, they have a banquet at ALA in June, and the award winners for Caldecott, Newbery, and a couple other awards get up and give a thank you speech, and you can often find them. I think Hornbook does their acceptance speeches, so it's kind of interesting. I've actually heard Sophie Blackall. This is her second winner. She won for Finding Winnie, I think, about the bear that was the inspiration for Winnie the Pooh. That was actually a real bear. So I think that's the book she won for. So it's interesting. This one she illustrated and wrote. You'll find that some are actually everything was illustrated and written by the same person this time, but you'll find sometimes that it will have a different writer with the Caldecott Award. Coretta Scott King is a newer award. 1970 it was begun, and this honors outstanding African American authors and illustrators. So they have an author winner, an illustrator winner, a Steptoe Award for new talent, and for author, and a new talent for illustrator. And you can see the honor books here. Honor books are here also. So these have gone a long way toward promoting books by authors and illustrators of color, particularly African American authors and illustrators. The Sibert Award is for the most distinguished informational picture book published in the United States in English during the preceding year. And I am very excited to say that I'm going to be on this committee, and when you look next year at Sibert committee members, my name will be on there. I am just so excited. We get to read all kinds of nonfiction books, which is one of my interests, and this is it's sponsored by ALSC, which means that we're looking at books up to age 14. So I can't wait to start. next year, hopefully I won't break my collarbone and I will be at the award ceremony and we will be announcing the winner and honor books for the Sibert. And I won't be able to tell you anything about our deliberations. Pura Belpré was named after a Latina librarian at New York Public Library, and it honors a writer and illustrator. It's a Latino writer and illustrator whose work best portrays, affirms, and celebrates the Latino cultural experience in an outstanding work of literature for children and youth. And they don't have images up here, but the Poet X, which also, sometimes there's crossover. This also won the Prince Award, which actually I don't have. Oh, yes, I do. The Prince Award for teen books. And then there was an illustrator. They have an author award winner, The Illustrator Dreamers by Yuya Morales. I'm not saying that correctly, but she's won before, I think, an honor book and illustrator honor books. So the illustrator honor books are also nice to take a look at as to get ideas for books. And here's the Prince Award, which is literary excellence in young adult literature. And the reason that it can win a Pura Belpré and a Prince Award is the Pura Belpré does not limit itself to 14 and to particular ages, I don't believe. So the Prince Award is for teens. This one's a younger award. I think it's only been around since 2000. I think Walter Dean Myers was, who is, it really, let me see, it says here, yeah, 2000. Walter Dean Myers won for Monster. He was had a huge outsized influence on the young adult literature, and it was nice when he won the first award. All right, some local awards, Garden State's Children's Book Awards, which I have been on. I'm taking a 2-year break now that I'm going on to Sibert, but I was on this since about 2001, I think. And this were winners last year, and what they do is, it's kind of nice, it's just New Jersey. We come up with a list of 20 books, approximately 20 books, up to 20 books in each category. Early reader, fiction series. I think this year there was a graphic novel. We did, instead of fiction series, it depends on how many books we're getting in different categories, and nonfiction. So there's always early reader and nonfiction and fiction. The series books have kind of changed from early reader. Used to be Cynthia Rylant won every year, so they had a different series category for her. Fiction series were big, and now graphic novels have become big. I think it was graphic novels that we put there. So graphic novels. So what happens with these is once there's a group of librarians that get together, and once they've come up with the list, then we create a ballot, and students vote on this. So anyone can vote. You can have this in your classroom. You can vote in one category. If you've got, kindergarten and first graders, you can have them read what you have of these books. I am an easy reader, yes. You can have them, vote on, say you have 10 of these books or 5 of these books. You can have, indicate that they're, that they, have them read them and have them go in and vote themselves. You can vote electronically, or you can, I believe for this year, still send in a vote by ballot. So the ballot here has instructions for how to vote if you don't want to have your students vote electronically. And then this is a nice brochure for choosing your collection, increasing your collection, because it's winners from the past years, depending on what we could fit on there. So this goes back about 10 years. One of the things that, when the list is made up, what we're thinking about is not only quality, but kid appeal. Since kids are voting for these, it's not like sometimes Caldecott or sometimes Newbery books get chosen that people say, well, it's just not really appealing to kids, but they're choosing it for a different reason. They're choosing it because it's a distinguished book. Here we're looking at not only is this book a high quality book, but it's also appealing to kids. So the list is chosen, the original list that we develop is chosen for that with those criteria in mind, and then kids vote on it. So the winners tend to be books that are popular, as you can see here: Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Captain Underpants, but also Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's Library. So it can be a good place to go for books that you know will be popular. Garden State Teen Book Awards does a similar thing. I'm going to be posting this, and you probably have already seen this since you've gotten here, but I'm going to post the slides for this so that you have all the links that I'm showing you here. But if you go here to this link and go to the Garden State Teen Book Awards, they have winners and past annotated lists. So both of these books, the voting has stopped as of the end of December. They haven't announced the new winners. These are last year's winners. And these books go back a year or two because Caldecott and Newbery and the ALA books look at the year before. These books go back through 3 years, so that there's a chance that paperbacks will come out, and it's easier to get the books as they're voting through them. You could hopefully get paperbacks. It doesn't always happen that a paperback will come out, but there's a better chance after 3 years that a paperback will come out. This is also an easy, if you're interested, if you're a member of NJLA, you have to join separately, and a member of the YA section, you can become a reader for developing the lists. Teen Book Awards does a similar thing and develops the lists, and you can read and just send in your comments. You don't have to attend the meeting. Garden State Book Awards, you have to attend the meeting. Although we do have some school librarians that do that. There's 3 meetings a year that you have to attend. The Cooperative Children's Book Center has a ton of lists. This is a great site for all different kinds of awards. Alex Awards are adult books that appeal to young adults. American Indian Youth Literature Award, Arab American Book Award, Batchelder is translated books, all different kinds of wonderful books here. Middle East Outreach Council Book Awards. So these are updated with all different kinds. I didn't mention the Schneider Family Book Award. I'll talk about that in another lecture. Again, diversity it embodies an artistic expression of the disability experience. So that's a good one to keep in mind. Keep going backwards, sorry. Orbis Pictus is nice. It's the NCTE, National Council of Teacher for English, and it's excellence in writing of nonfiction for children. And not only do you get a winner, there's also multiple, there's honor and recommended books. And you can find older books also, books from previous years also. The notable books are list of books chosen. This should be coming out soon. You can see the discussion titles here. At the midwinter, they would have chosen. This is a longer list of books. It includes the award winners. Another reason why it hasn't come out yet. But it is a great. If any of you have been to NJSL, Elizabeth Burns and I do a presentation where we pick out of this list. We each pick out about 13 to 15 books that we find particularly interesting and do book talks on them. So if you go to NJSL or NJLA, you can find us. We have been accepted to NJLA in May, but they will come out on this page with a list of books. You can look at last year's books, and their list includes a short annotation, so you can get an idea of what they're about. And they break them down by the ages. Older means up to about 14. All ages just means where did all ages? That it appeals to K through 14. You don't really. The picture books are really for younger kids, whereas you might have a picture book like Crown, An Ode to the Fresh Cook, where cut where it really appeals to a much wider range of people. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about good books because there's a lot of discussion about what's a good book for child to read. And I really think that a good book is the book that appeals to the child. And what might appeal to us will not appeal to everybody. And just because a book was a classic once upon a time doesn't mean it was a good book at the time. I always like to use the example of Charles Dickens actually wrote for serials. His books came out as in the newspaper, and he was writing week by week and was paid by the word, I believe. So he was considered probably more of he and even Shakespeare were considered more of popular books rather than what we would consider classic good books. So be open to good books being a wide variety of books. Some of you may have cringed when I said we look at quality books for Garden State Book Awards, and I indicated that we do Diary of a Wimpy Kid because maybe you don't feel like they're a good book for kids to read, but they are a popular book and they have had a track record, and kids enjoy reading them. So much as we enjoy reading a variety of books, some of which other people may look down and say, well, that's not a good book. Kids enjoy reading a variety of books. And we have to refrain if we want students to become lifelong readers who are able to enjoy books and who grow and continue to read books. We need to encourage them to read not just what some canon tells us is a good book, but a variety of books and what appeals to them, especially in their leisure time reading. Some people make the argument that start kids out reading Diary of a Wimpy Kid and they'll go on to read a lot of good literature. And that can make it easier to accept, and it can make a good argument if you have somebody who's not willing to accept it. But I also think if they read the equivalent of Diary of a Wimpy Kid for years, that's fine too. I'm happy when people are reading. I just want to go over the difference between a book review, an annotation, and a book talk. So book review that you'll read in things like SLJ Hornbook has a plot overview, a critique, an evaluation, and a recommendation. It'll say this is recommended for a recommendation. Sorry about the recommendation. It'll say this is good for all libraries. This might be good for libraries who have students who are interested in this. This might not be good for most libraries. So all of those elements tend to be in a book review in very short amount of space a lot of times, but the elements. Whereas an annotation is more just a short recap of the book. It's less evaluative and more informative without giving away the whole plot. So if we look where I showed you annotations of the notable books, let me see if that's still there. It was just, it could be positive, like this one. In this bold homage, the authors emulate the style of their favorite poets. Stunning collages illuminate this joyful celebration of poetry. That's both evaluative and descriptive, but mostly you want to be descriptive and even try to bring in, when you do an annotation, particularly on a list like this, bring in, kind of tease them. So Baby Goes to Market, which I loved. In this vibrant Nigerian marketplace, Mama shops while Baby delights in the various vendors, picking up a few unexpected items along the way. So kind of leaves a little bit mystery. What are the items that she's picking up? And then the book talk is even more so book talk, book trailers, any kind of, when you're selling the book is an advertisement, and that's what I'm going to have you doing in the book trailer. You're going to be basically selling the book, teasing it even more so. No evaluation at all. Hopefully you've picked out a book that you're interested in and that you think your students, whoever the audience is, and it can be a fictional audience, are interested in, and get them to read the book. This is, how do I just give them enough information so that they'll want to come to me after I talk about it. You can do book talks in your library where you just take all your new books and go, boom, this is about this, this is about this, this is about this, this is about this. And somebody will be caught by that and want to take it out. So finding books, I want to remind you, I've given you some assigned books for each week. This week you don't have an assigned book. You choose 2 books. You don't have a required book to read for the genre. 2 award books. But it can be a classic when you have to choose, but it should be new to you. I don't want you to tell, by a classic I mean something that's been around for a while that maybe you haven't read. Should be new to you. You can use Novelist if you were in my class, in reference class. You got to know Novelist, but it is a Novelist K through 8 plus. It's available through the library, and you can go in. For some reason, it won't recognize my password in Safari. Just see, but you can go in. It's not going to take it because I'm not typing well. Okay, it's not going to let me go in this page. But you can go into Novelist and choose you can put in the genre and it'll come up with a list of recommendations. Also, be aware when I often list what level I want you to choose. So this time I've said any level, but I might ask you to choose a middle grade book or a picture book, or I might say it's all, but whatever you want. So pay attention to those. And you can get recommendations from librarians, other people, whoever you want to get recommendations from. So that is it. Thank you very much, and I will see you on the discussion board.